Iran wants Chinese satellites to help it spy on the West and Israel. China and the Philippines have yet another ship collision in the South China Sea, and why you shouldn't buy the Chinese-made game Black Myth Wukong. And more on this week's China News Headlines. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell, and I can't believe how amazing you are. Good looking, too. I've been making a push to get China Uncensored to 2 million subscribers by the end of the year. When I started just a few weeks ago, we needed 40,000 subscribers. Now it's down to just 10,000 more. So if you're watching and you aren't subscribed, hit that subscribe button. And if you are subscribed, again, remember to make sure you're still subscribed because YouTube has been secretly unsubscribing people. Now, on with the show. Once again, Chinese and Philippine ships have collided in the South China Sea. I feel like every time I say that, I should hold up today's newspaper so you know this isn't a rerun. Both countries are blaming each other for the crash, near the disputed Sabina Shoal, also known as Escoda. A spokesman for China's Coast Guard said that a Philippine vessel had deliberately collided with a Chinese ship early on Monday, which totally sounds like something the Philippines would do, and when has China ever lied? He went on to say the Philippine Coast Guard illegally entered these waters that totally belong to China, why they're practically in China's backyard. And so China was forced to take control measures in response. Funny, that sounds like an invasion to me. Both China and the Philippines have stationed Coast Guard vessels in the area, since the Philippines is worried that China might be trying to build an artificial island there, which is definitely something China has never done before. Now you might be thinking, wait, didn't China and the Philippines just sign a deal to stop these kinds of clashes? Well, that was at the second Thomas Shoal, and this was the Sabina Shoal. Why do people bother making these deals with the CCP? In response to the collision, the U.S. has reminded the Chinese Communist Party about its defense treaty with the Philippines. Apparently, if the headline is to be believed, in the form of a trigger warning, which pretty much sums up the 21st century so far. Trigger warning, we're on an ever-accelerating path toward World War III. The CCP is like my pet poodle. They're not misbehaving because they don't know any better. They're smart and choosing to be a terror. The only difference is the CCP isn't cute enough to get away with it. Not only did the U.S. condemn China for the incident, but it blamed it altogether, saying it must adhere to international law and desist from its dangerous and destabilizing conduct, which I'm sure China will definitely start doing after that stern talking to, just like it stopped the last 4,600 times this happened. Well, 4,601st times the charm. But China's also getting something of a boost from the U.S., which wants to coordinate with the Chinese Communist Party during times of financial stress. This is the result of a few talks held in China last week between CCP and U.S. officials. The talks ended with both sides expressing support for information sharing between the two nations during times of financial stress to make it easier to quickly coordinate as needed. China and the U.S. apparently exchanged a list of people to contact on both sides should a financial crisis occur. I wonder why this conversation might be happening now. Iran is looking to purchase advanced spy satellites from China. Hopefully those satellites are about as advanced as last year's spy balloon. In light of the ongoing Middle East war, Tehran thinks these spy satellites could make it easier for them or their proxies to target Israel or Western military bases in the region. A report in the Washington Post revealed that multiple delegations from Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard have been negotiating with two China-based companies that manufacture low-cost, high-resolution satellites. These Chinese satellites are capable of producing images far superior to domestically produced ones. And it comes as ties between the CCP and the Mullah regime have strengthened. Beijing has refused to denounce Iran's regional aggression and support for terrorist groups, and has routinely blamed Israel and the West for tensions in the Middle East. And of course, both countries continue to support Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Iran has supplied suicide drones and other weapons to the Russian army, but notably in 2022, Changguang, one of the two satellite companies Iran is courting, sold satellites to Russia's Wagner mercenary group for use in Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And both Russia and the CCP have helped Iran modernize its military and skirt Western sanctions for several years. It's like a throuple of evil. Only time will tell if the satellite deal will be made, because that could risk Western sanctions being imposed on Beijing's already faltering economy. but it would definitely project an image of defiance by China against Western interests and influence in the Middle East, while increasing the dangers of a regional war. Just realized I might need to hold up another newspaper because that's so repetitive you might think it's a rerun. Vietnam's new leader held a meeting with Xi Jinping in Beijing. To Lam, Vietnam's new president, chose China for his first trip abroad since coming to power last month, and even brought his wife. This might seem odd given China's bad history with Vietnam. They fought a war in 1979 and have competing territorial claims in the South China Sea. And recently, Vietnam held joint military drills with the Philippines. But both Vietnam and China do have substantial trade relations that have grown over the past several years. In fact, back in November, Xi signed over a dozen deals with Vietnam. At this meeting with Lam, Xi said that China has always regarded Vietnam as a priority in its neighborhood diplomacy, and supports Vietnam in adhering to the party leadership, taking the socialist path suited to its national conditions, and deepening the cause of reforms and socialist modernization. Ah yes, it's all about socialist worker solidarity and comradeship. Who would have guessed? All while throwing in a few phrases about modernization reforms, as Xi claims he wants to do in China. I'd say this sounds like it was written by AI, but AI comes across as more human. For his part, Lam said that bilateral ties with China are a top priority in Vietnam's external policy, and continue to underscore the shared values of the China-Vietnam relationship, meaning communism. U.S. lawmakers are questioning clinical trials in China. A bipartisan group of lawmakers are concerned that U.S. drug companies' collaboration with Chinese military-run hospitals might have contributed to intellectual property theft and human rights abuses against minority groups such as the Uyghurs. What? When have Chinese scientists and doctors ever done anything unethical that led to the suffering of others? Give me one global example, I dare you. Of course, Beijing denies committing any human rights abuses against the Uyghurs. It's just a human rights summer camp that lasts all year and they're never allowed to leave. But like I said, this isn't just about human rights abuses. It's also about intellectual property theft. The letter requests the FDA answer a number of questions concerning the trials by October 1st. This is a sign of increasing concern about China's biotech industry and its ties to China's military. And finally, China has scored a major propaganda victory with Black Myth Wukong, made by Chinese game developer Game Science. It's one of the most popular games today. Don't buy it. The Chinese Communist Party has its fingerprints all over it. This isn't just some independent game maker that happens to be in China and has nothing to do with politics or the Chinese state. It was mostly funded by Tencent, China's largest gaming company. And any company that has more than 50 employees is required by law to have a Chinese Communist Party secretary in the company, reporting to the government. Why is the Chinese state throwing its weight behind this game? Especially when the party calls video games spiritual opium. The goal is to do to gaming what TikTok did to social media. TikTok was literally brainwashing Americans, promoting CCP messaging while silencing critical voices. And guess what? Game Science sent out a notice telling streamers playing the game not to talk about COVID or anything to do with Chinese politics or human rights. On the Steam discussion board for the game, there were tons of comments that directly and indirectly criticized Chinese authorities and Xi, and many were mysteriously removed. But people are praising the game because it's not woke. It doesn't push DEI ideological messages like many Western-made games do. And while that is a problem, buying a game made by a communist regime that is literally killing tens of thousands of Americans a year with fentanyl is stupid. The same thing happened with TikTok. Communist regimes use the dialectics to get you to side with them to fight another enemy. With TikTok, you had people who did not like the censorship and control of Western social media like Facebook, but then they started saying TikTok was the only social media where you could get uncensored information, even though we know the CCP was censoring TikTok left and right. Look, it took years to figure out even part of the scope of how TikTok was brainwashing Americans and stealing our data. Why would you just trust a video game they made? There is a reason the CCP is pushing this game. It might not seem like a big deal to buy one cool game, But if they're successful, China will dominate the video game industry. Hollywood self-censored because of the power and influence of China. We don't want China doing that to games either. If you'd like to know more about this, click on this video about Black Myth Wukong from my other channel, Gamers Unbeaten. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.